Hello, this is episode 41 of Murder Mile. So basically, 3 guys called Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt robbed a jeweller's on Charlotte Street, beat up its owner, did a runner, some bloke got shot, and because no one knew which robber had killed him, as a deterrent to any criminals, all 3 men were found guilty of murder. 1 was imprisoned, 2 were executed, even though only one of them fired the fatal shot. And this case sparked a big old hoo-ha, which eventually led to the abolition of the death penalty in Britain. Okay, that's it. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. What? Why are you still there? Oh, you want to know more? Oh, well, that's strange. You see, normally, when this story is told, people only focus on those 3 little details. How young the robbers were, how their double hanging failed to deter any future gangsters, and how the execution of at least 1 innocent man sparked a debate which put an end to capital punishment in our country forever. So I don't really know what else I can tell you. Except the truth. And all of the pieces that every article ever written about the case of Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt will have failed to tell you about this whole bloody case. And I warn you, it's a lot. So strap in. Welcome to Murder Mile. A true crime podcast. No. Fast forward this shit. We've got no time for waffle today. Yep. Guided walk. Blah, blah, blah. There may be bangs. There may be rude bits. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, here we go. My name is Michael. I am your tour guide. And this is Murder Mile. Episode 41. The Forgotten Truth about the Charlotte Street Robbery. Today, I'm standing on the corner of Charlotte Street in Fitzrovia, W1. 4 streets north of the Corner House Cafe where Jacques Tratzet slaughtered his family. 5 streets west of Margaret Lowe's home, where she became the 3rd victim of the Blackout Ripper. And 2 streets east... No, you know what? Bollocks to this bit. It's basically just me, a brummie, pretending to be posh, which I'm not, telling you how dull Fitzrovia is, and it is, in a snarky, sarcastic way and at a coma-inducing pace. In essence, Fitzrovia is drab, grey and boring as hell. Charlotte Street has a nice bit and a crap bit. We're in the crap bit. And even though the murder location has been bulldozed into dust twice, I'd normally waste precious time waffling on about how the new building looks like its architect had a seizure whilst shoving stickle bricks up his arse. And how it's now home to a sexual health clinic, which is really just a piss-poor excuse for me to insert several euphemisms for bots, foofs, plums and todgers. But not today. Right, that's the bollocks over with. Here's the story. As it was here, on Friday the 29th of April 1947, at Jay's the Jewellers, on the corner of Charlotte Street and Tottenham Street, that a bungled robbery would bring the British legal system to its knees. To get to grips with the details of the Charlotte Street robbery, of the many names you'll hear in this case, the most important are these 4. Geraghty, Jenkins, Rolt and Walsh. Christopher James Geraghty, age 20, tall, neat, surly, 5'10", medium build, dark swept back hair, prone to outbursts of anger and violence, whose criminal record includes a caution, aged 11, for the theft of a torch, 3 years in Borstal, aged 16, for intent to rob with an offensive weapon, and 1.5 years in Borstal, aged 18, for violence and robbery. Charles Henry Jenkins, aged 22, short, scrawny, scruffy, 5'8", slim build, brown ruffled hair, an odd grimace on his face, and an extensive criminal record from the age of 11, including shoplifting, trespassing, and breaking and entering, serving 2 years for assault on a policeman and 15 months hard labour for shop breaking and theft of a motor vehicle. Terence John Fraser Rolt, age 17, small, slim and baby-faced, curly brown hair and a short criminal record, including being bound over for 2 years for shop breaking and stealing cigarettes, and 18 months in Borstal for loitering with intent to commit robbery and the theft of several pencils. And William Henry Walsh, aged 37, stocky, squat, with prior convictions for receiving stolen goods. 4 criminals: Geraghty, Jenkins, Rolt and Walsh. But a few days later, 3 of these men would be charged with murder. So how did such a simple robbery go so badly wrong? Well, Jay's the Jewellers at 73 to 75 Charlotte Street wasn't their intended target. Where things went awry was 2 days prior, at a very different jeweller's 2.5 miles west in Bayswater. It was the afternoon of Wednesday the 25th of April 1947. The sky was thick, murky and grey, as dark formless clouds loomed large over Bayswater. And with Queensway being a semi-affluent street stretching from Hyde Park to Paddington, as dull drops of good old British drizzle sprinkled the sparse throng of shoppers, parked across the street, 3 masked men sat in a stolen Morris 10. Their target was A.B. Davies Limited, a small, independent jewellers at 91 Queensway. They knew when to hit, what to grab, and how to escape. And with the shop having been cased by a stocky cockney just 2 days before, this robbery was planned to perfection. By 3:25 p.m, with the schools letting out, the streets would be empty, being staffed by just 2 men in their mid to late 50s. The jewellers had next to no security. Having stolen their getaway car less than 1 hour prior, even the owner didn't know that his Morris 10 was missing. And being dressed in masks, gloves, and dark vague clothes, the robbers would leave nothing behind to identify them. The shop was tiny, 21 feet wide by 14 feet deep, with 2 long glass counters left and right, chock full of watches and rings. To the left was a watchmaker's bench, at which sat 52-year-old Herbert Colpus, who chatted to Albert Barron, an engineer who was fixing the phone. To the right was the safe, and serving 2 customers, William and Betty Thompson, was the shop's owner, 58-year-old Stanley Coleman. As robberies go, this was only a 3-man job, with 1 to cover the staff, 1 to clear the cabinets, and 1 to clean out the safe. Bursting through the double doors, 3 armed men with their mouths masked by handkerchiefs and gripping black automatic pistols instantly turned the tranquil peace of this tiny jeweller's into a chaotic, noisy cacophony of shouting, shoving, and confusion. Being terrified, William and Betty Thompson faced the wall, eyes shut, heads down. Albert Barron kept his hands held high, hoping to dear God that he'd make it out alive, as with one of the rage-fueled robbers losing his rag. Herbert Colpus was violently shoved into a cabinet, smashing the glass. As obeying the armed robbers' every word, Stanley Coleman opened the safe. And with their bags filled, someone shouted, come on, let's go!" And just like that, they were gone. And that was it. They were in and out in less than 3 minutes. No shots were fired. Nobody died. No one was seriously hurt. And none of the robbers were identified. It was the perfect robbery. Having nabbed 26 rings, 4 bracelets, 1 brooch, and 17 watches, for 3 desperate men barely out of Borstal, and a stocky cockney with a gambling problem, split 4 ways, it was enough. Except it wasn't split 4 ways, it was split 2 ways, with Walsh taking half. The robbers had been robbed, and with 3 criminals being victims to a crime, who were they going to call? The police? So being broke, hungry, and furious, Geraghty and Jenkins set about robbing another jeweller's. Only this time, instead of remaining anonymous, this robbery would escalate their names into infamy. The plan was hatched in the Billet public house in Bermondsey, South London, on the morning of Friday the 27th of April 1947, just hours before the robbery itself. And although a bit rushed, the setup was the same as before. Jenkins would cover the staff, Rolt would clear the cabinets, and Geraghty would clean out the safe. With handkerchiefs as masks, a stolen getaway car, and all 3 men packing a revolver, the deal was done. The loot would be evenly split 3 ways, and the boys went to check out their target. At 12 p.m, all 3 men departed Shadwell Tube Station and arrived at Goode Street Tube Station just shy of 1 p.m. As before, being eager to dump the getaway car and escape amongst the mass of commuters on London Underground, they'd already purchased 3 return tickets to Shadwell for 6p apiece. And having found a suitable black Vauxhall 11 saloon left outside of 56 Whitfield Street, just 1 road away, Rolt had no problem stealing it, as in a less security-conscious era, Rolt knew that almost all Vauxhall 11s were started by a single key marked as MRM 11, which he had in his pocket. And having briefly cased the joint, eyed up the loot in the window, and swiped a brown paper bag from a local grocer's to stash their sparkly goodies, seeing that the shop was a little bit full of lunchtime punters, Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt popped into a nearby Greasy Spoon cafe to wait a while with a cup of tea and a bacon sarnie. As before, they'd get in and out in less than 3 minutes, with no shots fired, no one injured, nobody dead, and none of the robbers identified. Their target was Jay's the Jewellers, a diamond merchant and pawnbrokers, at the junction of Charlotte Street and Tottenham Street, just a 2-minute walk from the Goode Street Tube Station. and although they'd never set foot inside the store before, had no knowledge of the layout, the safe, the staff, or the security, by rehashing the Bayswater plan, they guessed it would be okay. By 2:30 p.m, with the schools still an hour away from letting out, the streets were packed with parents. Being staffed by 6 people, the jewellers had more than adequate security. And being dressed in a bizarre array of brightly coloured masks, caps and coats, the robbers were easy to identify. Rolt was dressed in dark clothes. Bafflingly, Geraghty decided to commit an armed robbery wearing a bright blue overcoat with fetching red checks, a cheeky blue cap and a delightfully white silk handkerchief over his mouth. And although Jenkins' cap and mask was equally florid, more importantly, he wore a fawn-coloured raincoat. So as Rolt parked the getaway car on the corner, when Geraghty and Jenkins separately burst in via the shop's 2 entrances, instantly, everything went to pot. The shop was a chaotic mess, as being spread over 2 floors, split into 2 separate rooms, both of which were subdivided into several separate sections, with every cabinet locked, every door barred, every window alarmed, and confusion being a big part of the store's security, as having been robbed on a regular basis. This time, the jewellers were prepared. In the first room, the pledges department, nothing was on display. No gold, no silver, no bronze. Just its 70-year-old shop manager, Mr. Bertram Keats, sat inside a steel cage, behind a wall of bars, and oblivious to the masked man who stood in his doorway, as he was half blind and almost totally deaf. Next door, in the sales department, it was no better, as although its gleaming cabinets were crammed full of watches, rings and sparkly things, there stood the bulk of the staff. Youthful sales assistant Ronald Grout, 2 mid-20s salesmen Alfred Ambrose and William Hazel, and its owner Alfred Stock. And as both Jenkins and Geraghty stopped, gasped and recoiled, the plan went out the window. Geraghty, with a gun in each hand, pointed the rusty .32 caliber Bulldog revolver at the startled staff, and to get their attention, he fired a warning shot. As he dived over the counter, totally failing to spot that 17-year-old Ronald Grout had slipped out and dashed into a nearby cafe to call the police. And once again, for the second time in 2 days, a West London jewellery store descended into chaos. But amongst a sea of swirling confusion, it was the staff who had the upper hand. Having shoved the barrel of the gun into Mr. Keats' wrinkled and rather bemused face, having screamed, "Open the cage!" with a dull buzz, Mr. Keats let Jenkins in. And although he was rather old, mostly deaf, and practically blind, Mr. Keats fought back and pummeled the masked man with his fists and his feet, as in the ensuing scuffle, somewhere in the shop, Jenkins lost his gun. An ear-splitting siren wailed as the staff hid the alarm. In panic, Geraghty fired a shot, narrowly missing the salesman and blasting out a glass panel between both rooms. And seizing the chance, with the cabinet keys in hand, Ambrose and Hazel dashed out into the safety of the New Scala restaurant. The robbery was a total shambles. As with the unarmed Jenkins being duffed up by a deaf pensioner, the cabinets locked, the staff scarpered, thick crowds having formed on Charlotte Street, all eager to get an eyeful of the criminal commotion, as having refused to open the safe, Geraghty angrily beat 64-year-old Alfred Stock about the head with a thick metal butt of his gun. And although, once again, the robbers were angry, bruised and empty-handed, hearing sirens, from the doorway Rolt shouted to his comrades, "Come on, let's go!" as the three-masked men fled into their getaway car to make a daring escape. Or they would have done, had the car started. Being notoriously unreliable, even with the right key, as Rolt struggled to turn over the ignition of the Vauxhall 11. With horns hooting, fists shaking, and distant police sirens growing ever nearer, the street began to swell with a throng of angry people. And after several seconds of sweating, thumping, and colourful curse words, by the time that the stuttering engine finally fired up, not only had a 10-ton truck blocked the fleeing bandits' escape, but as they tried to reverse, a second truck pulled up behind. Being trapped, they had no choice but to run. As Jenkins and Rolt bolted east down Tottenham Street, Rolt was roughly grappled to the ground by two passers-by, as behind him, having left Geraghty to fend for himself, an angry mob circled the heavily armed robber, wielding whatever came to hand, whether bricks, brooms, or bottles. And as the shop's bloodied owner, Albert Stock, staggered into the street screaming, "Help! Police!" his finger pointing at Geraghty, being swarmed by revving trucks, hooting buses, and looming locals, as Geraghty tried to flee, roaring up Charlotte Street, a bright red motorbike blocked his path. As Rolt kicked himself free by booting the heads of his grappling pursuers, although the sharp shock startled him, Rolt fled and didn't look back, as behind him he heard a loud bang. One street over, on Torrington Place, Jenkins and Rolt darted into Brook House, stashed Jenkins' black gloves, brightly coloured cap, and easily recognisable fawn-coloured raincoat in a second-floor storeroom, and then hopped on a bus to the Strand, where Rolt flung his gun into the Thames, and both men disappeared into the crowded darkness of the London Underground. And although he was pursued on foot, even Geraghty managed to escape, as the angry mob had dispersed, just seconds after he had shot a motorcyclist in the face. The robbers vanished. Nobody saw their faces, nobody heard their names, and none of them had left a fingerprint. So the police investigation ground to a halt. Then, on the 3rd of May 1947, Mr. Reginald Hine, caretaker of Brook House in Torrington Place, found an easily recognisable fawn-coloured raincoat, speckled with blood, inside the pocket of which the owner had left a tailor's ticket, which led to a known offender called Charles Henry Jenkins. Jenkins was swiftly arrested, along with Geraghty and Rolt. On the 28th of July, 1947, after a 6-day trial at the Old Bailey. Even though, throughout the robbery, each of the accused was heavily disguised, were never identified by witnesses, were unwilling to admit the truth, and as it was impossible to prove who had fired the fatal shot, even though Geraghty had confessed to the murder, 22-year-old Charles Henry Jenkins, 20-year-old Christopher James Geraghty, and 17-year-old Terence John Peter Rolt were all found guilty of assault, armed robbery, and murder. Classified as a minor, 17-year-old Rolt was detained in prison at His Majesty's pleasure. But being just a few years older, on Friday the 19th of September 1947, as a deterrent to would-be criminals, both Geraghty and Jenkins were executed at Pentonville Prison. An innocent man had been hung. And by 1965, after many miscarriages of justice, the death penalty in the United Kingdom was abolished. What? That's it. 3 angry guys robbed a jeweller's in revenge for having been stiffed by a buddy, and in the course of a bungled robbery, someone got shot, and because the legal system couldn't prove who had killed him, even though Geraghty was clearly the murderer, a crime for which he had confessed to, Jenkins, as an unarmed and innocent man, was executed. But then, as I said earlier, when this story is told, normally people only focus on those 3 little details. How young the robbers were, how their punishment failed as a deterrent, and how the execution of an innocent man sparked a debate which led to the abolition of the death penalty. And yet, no matter what way this story is told, Geraghty, Jenkins, and Rolt always come across as the victims. But then, who was the real victim in this story? There's one who always gets overlooked. If you blinked, you would have missed him. But if you'll let me, I'd like to tell you his story. On the morning of the 27th of April, 1947, as 3 feckless half-wits called Geraghty, Jenkins, and Rolt readied themselves to steal from a store because they were too lazy, greedy, and thick to hold down an honest job, 34-year-old Alec de Antiquitas, a former corporal in the Home Guard, a loyal husband to his wife Gladys, and doting father to their 6 children, toiled away in his motorcycle repair shop. The Blitz had destroyed everything: his home, his work, his life. But being eager to put a roof over his family's head and food on the table, with limited funds, Alec rebuilt their cramped little home, and in a small structure made of corrugated iron, he built a workshop. And after 2 years of sweat, tears, and stress, finally his hard work was paying off. Described by locals as a man of excellent character, although Alec was barely 5'4", into that little body was packed a barrel load of bravery. As in just that month alone, he had stopped a startled horse from running over a young boy, and had ran into a burning building to rescue a child. That morning, having left his home at 186 High Street in Collier's Wood, South London, As a husband and wife team, Alec and Gladys would often ride from showroom to scrapyard across the city, building the business and making sales, with him on his motorcycle and her in the sidecar. But with their youngest son being sick with the flu, that morning, Gladys stayed at home. At 2:32 p.m, being parked 1 block south of Jay's the Jeweller's, Alec was sat atop of his flame-red 1930s Indian Scout motorcycle. He just had 2 more sales to go, and then he would go home. In the distance, he heard what sounded like a car backfire, and thought nothing of it. And then a second bang, from the same direction. Slowly, as the traffic thickened, alarms wailed, and an armed angry mob loomed large on the northwest corner of Charlotte Street, being blocked by trucks and desperate to leave, with 2 decent citizens having wrestled one robber to the ground, and the taller, masked man now ready to run. Alec fired up his motorcycle, roared his bike up Charlotte Street, and right outside of Jay's, he cut off the robber's only space of escape. Being stood face to face, Geraghty could easily have backed up, climbed over, or pushed by Alec, but he didn't. As Alec was unarmed, with his empty hands spread wide to block the robber's escape, seeing red, Geraghty shot Alec in the head. Although unconscious and bleeding profusely from a 5.5-inch oval and jagged bullet wound, Sergeant William Meldrum attempted to administer first aid at the scene. Until at 2:47 p.m, when Alec was admitted to the Middlesex Hospital. Being barely alive, with his blink reflexes absent, his breathing limited to deep raspy gasps, and a bloody froth oozing freely from his purple lips, as a .45 caliber bullet had eviscerated his left corpus stratum, a key part of the brain critical for movement. Being in a coma, as his brain bled uncontrollably, 34-year-old married father of 6, Alec de Antiquitas, died of his injuries just 10 minutes later. So angry was the outrage at these callous cowards who had left a decent family bereft of a father, a husband, and its sole breadwinner. With Alec's life insurance policy being just a paltry £50, the Carnegie Heroes Fund raised almost £6,000 to purchase his family a more suitable family home. Parliament awarded his widow an annual payment of £100 a year. For his bravery, Alec was posthumously awarded the Captain Ralph Binney Memorial Medal. And for the full 6 days of the trial, dressed in black, sat Gladys, silent and stoic, barely yards from the man who had murdered her husband. The real victims of the Charlotte Street robbery were Alec de Antiquitas, his wife, and their children. And this was their story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to Murder Mile. Don't forget that Extra Mile is just after the break, but before that, here's my recommended podcast of the week. It's one that you'll know very well. It is, of course, the fabulous They Walk Among Us.
They Walk Among Us is an award-winning true crime podcast. From the sinister and surreal to the brutal and bizarre, Join us to hear more on the UK's most notorious and obscure crimes, featuring well-known cases like the life and crimes of the UK's most violent inmate Charles Bronson, to the sad tale of the Gibbons twins whose string of petty crimes would lead them to be trapped in Broadmoor for 11 years before their eventual release ended in tragedy. We also cover lesser-known cases like the woman who murdered a husband with an ornamental frog and kept him mummified in her shed for 18 years, or the teenager that used his elaborate online fantasy life to plot his own murder. Listen and subscribe to They Walk Among Us through Acast, Apple Podcasts, or your favourite podcast provider.
Sorry, I forgot to say there's no extra mile this week. Yeah, sorry about that. Just didn't have time to record it. Okay, bye. Of course there's an extra mile. There's always an extra mile, and there's always time for extra mile. Oh, time for a drink. Those Cockney accents really messed up my voice. I really struggled with that one. Or, geezer, leave it out, geezer. I was having some fun with it, though. It's going to have fun editing this episode as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. Mess around with the format. I've tried over the last couple of episodes really to kind of give you something, kind of lay down a format so you kind of understand how each murder mile is going to lay out. You know, there's kind of a formula to them now, but what I'm trying to do is have a bit of fun and mess with the formula. So we've got the fast forward going on. We've got obviously got a false ending on here. Most of this episode was an entire red herring, or it was really just back history to make you look one way whilst I kind of did a kind of bait and switch. It was kind of diversion. I deliberately tried to tell you very little about the murder until we had to. And then it was like, let's learn about the murder. So I hope you enjoyed that one. That was something different. Obviously, to new people of Murder Mile, this is the bit where I dive into all the extra details about Murder Mile, about this episode. Not essential. You don't need to stay here. But it can be quite interesting. Obviously, with this case, there was a lot of details. This was a big file, and it took such a long time to go through it because it was so complicated. There's extra bits in here that are quite interesting, so I'll dive into them. I'll make a little caveat right at the start. So, on the Bayswater robbery that I mentioned right at the start, that was the first robbery, of which the three... Walsh was the guy who checked out the location, fenced the jewellery afterwards, and kept almost half of the goodies afterwards, and stiffed Geraghty and Jenkins. Involved in that, because they didn't know who was involved in that robbery until they went to trial for murder later on, where they tried to dob Walsh into it. No one really knew who'd committed that robbery at all. Hence, I deliberately don't use their names in there at the start in the robbery. I just say three masked men. But Rolt wasn't involved in that robbery. I have to make that clear right here. It was actually a man called Michael Joseph Gillam. I deliberately took him out of the story because we already had enough names in there already. There's already, you've had a lot of names in there. I didn't want to confuse it. So, because they were masked men, it was Geraghty and Jenkins and Michael Joseph Gillam. And Walsh was the fence and the guy the stocky Cockney who'd gone in there and checked out the Bayswater jewellery store. He'd gone in there asking if they'd got horseshoe-shaped earrings. Yeah, very nice. Very tasteful. Man of taste, obviously. So I just thought I'd mention that. Michael Joseph Gillam was actually charged with handling stolen goods at the time of the Old Bailey trial. It was just after that. He was sentenced to 5 years. But because they were all masked, they couldn't prove that he was one of the robbers of the Bayswater robbery. So obviously he wasn't charged with that. But he was charged with handling stolen goods because they found some of the goods still on him. He hadn't sold them all off. One thing you might have noticed in there that I still find baffling. I didn't put it in the story. I took it slightly out because sometimes it's not right to put a comedy moment into a story when you're too busy trying to tell something dramatic. But think about it this way. Right, Charlotte Street robbery. They'd got off the tube at Goodge Street, which is a Northern Line tube, which runs parallel to Tottenham Court Road. They'd walked one street over to Charlotte Street, which, even if you look on Google Maps, it's a 2-minute walk. It's a 1-minute run at best. They'd bought a return ticket to Shadwell Station, which cost them 6p a piece each, so they could get on the tube and escape there. And what their plan was to steal a getaway car, which they did, which was a Vauxhall 11, black Vauxhall 11, drive it at speed from Charlotte Street, dump it at Goode Street tube station, and then get on the tube. Yeah? Why? Why steal a car and have it parked outside on Charlotte Street, only to drive it what is effectively a 1-minute runaway, which in a car is probably 20 seconds, and then dump it there? You've got to get in the car, you've got to get yourself comfortable, you've got to switch on the car, start the ignition, which for them was obviously a problem. You've got to weave your way through traffic. Why not just run? Why waste? Oh, such idiots. Why did they do that? Why were they? Because they were so close to the tube, and actually they were next to Tottenham Court Road tube. They were also not too far away from Great Portland Street tube, which is multiple lines, and Warren Street as well. They could have just gone anywhere. It's on major bus routes. They could have just jumped on a bus like they did elsewhere. Why did they have to steal a bloody car? God, they're idiots. Really are idiots. They were using the same plan that they'd used before on the Bayswater robbery when they literally. I mean, it was the same there as well. The distance between the A&B Davies, the jewellers on Queensway, and Bishopsbridge Road, where they dumped their car, it was nothing. It was literally nothing. You could walk it in 5 minutes. It really wasn't worth stealing a car, but they did, and they were idiots, and just idiots. Anyway, so I've got more details to tell you. Obviously, what I did in this story, because we'd already done the important bit, I was leading you up to the reasons why they committed the murder. Obviously, I don't tell you that's what I'm doing, but that's what I'm doing is talking about the history of where the robbery came from, the fact that they were angry, the fact that they they'd organised a robbery. So I got some pricks going past in a boat. Problem is, it's a Saturday here, and loads of pricks have gone out and rented a boat, and they have no idea what they're doing. And if they get any nearer, I'm gonna smash their faces in. Oh God, they're idiots today. What was I saying? I can't remember. Yeah, so I was leading you up to the point where the murder actually happens, but I don't tell you that that's what it is. That's what we're leading to, is the murder, and then we get the escape, which for us is really unimportant because the murder has actually happened. So I cut a lot of this out, but it is quite interesting. There's some really interesting parts. So, as you remember, 2 of the robbers escaped, Jenkins and Rolt. Now, just off Tottenham Road, what they'd done is they jumped onto the running board of a taxi, and the taxi was owned by a guy called Albert Victor Grubb. Why they did that? Obviously, you'd think if you were escaping, you'd want to lose your mask and you want to be as inconspicuous as possible. They didn't think about that at all. What they wanted to do was escape, so they jumped onto the running board. These are the old sideboards of the old taxis that they used to have. Jumped on those, made themselves very clear as the taxi went along Tottenham Road and headed towards Tottenham Road. And as the taxi turned into Torrington Place, the taxi driver was angry, Albert, and he basically told them to piss off. They jumped off his taxi. They dashed into Brock House. Now, so going into Brock House, 2 men were on their way trying to get into Brock House at that moment. One was Percy Skinner, a lorry driver who was making a delivery. And another one, there was a boy as well. Oh, here he is. 14-year-old Brian Cox, who was an office boy at medical bottle supplies at Brock House. Basically, Rolt and Jenkins pushed past them to try and get in, barged their way in, ran upstairs, said that they were looking for someone called Hooper, which they weren't because there was no one in the building called Hooper. They dashed upstairs, making a hell of a lot of noise. They went up to the second floor, and then they started basically looking all sweaty and nervous and peeping through all of the windows and running upstairs. And basically everyone looked to them. Loads of people came out and saw them and went, what the hell is going on? Two idiots running around. And that's where they decided to get rid of Jenkins, the brightly coloured jacket that he was wearing, which eventually convicted them. Really, he could have taken it home and could have burnt it, but instead he decided to dump it in a building. Ugh. Why did he do that? Because he's a bloody idiot. Anyway, what else happened there? Oh yeah, no. So as he was taking off the jacket, see, this is why I took it out, because it's all silly and it just wouldn't have made any point to it. As Jenkins was taking off his jacket, he spilt a crap load of keys all over the floor. He had loads of keys. He had some of the car keys that obviously Rolt had used to get into the those dickheads are coming back again. The Vauxhall 11 that they'd stolen. He got all the keys in the pocket. He'd spilt them all over the floor. They'd gone in between the partitions of a lift and fallen down, so they couldn't actually collect them, pick them up. It was a bit of a kerfuffle. Then he hid the keys. Oh, I hope they crash. They really are dickheads, and they have no idea what they're doing. Ugh, you should see it here. They really are a bunch of arseholes. I think I'm going to call the company and have their deposit taken away. Ha 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 ha. I've done it before. I will do it again. So they made a big cock up, and then they disappeared. A gentleman called Reginald Campbell Hyam, who I mentioned before, was the foreman and painter who was there. He was the one who like 8 days later, discovered this jacket that we mentioned, the fawn-coloured Macintosh, and the cap, and the gloves, hidden behind a partition on the second floor in an anteroom, and basically handed it into the police. It's because of him that they were able to make the connection between Jenkins and Jenkins' associates from that point onwards, which was fantastic. It really was. It just shows that small little details like that can make a big difference. Poor dear, I got burpees. Now, prior to this moment, the police had really struggled with this investigation. What they'd done is, because the men were masked, everyone who it had said had seen them, the police brought them in, as rightly so, and they took them to the Criminal Records Office and showed them a series of mugshots of people who they guessed were responsible for robberies in this area, who they thought might be responsible for the Charlotte Street robbery. Loads of witnesses. Everyone looked to them. Geraghty, Jenkins, Rolt were not identified at all. Obviously, because they were disguised, because they'd got the masks over their faces. They were wearing caps. People really couldn't see who they were. There was a widespread press campaign at that moment, and the police were going door to door, but literally they had no luck until the discovery of that fawn-coloured Macintosh. That really was the key piece of information. Even the police managed to track down the owner of the stolen Vauxhall 11, registration plate KPK 525. It was owned by a gentleman called Claude Alexander Green, who was a company director. He'd left his car at 56 Whitfield Street, which is a street right next to Charlotte Street, at about 2 p.m. So just about 30 minutes before it was stolen. And he didn't realise, he didn't return until about 3:30, by which time it had gone. He didn't realise at all. So on some of the pictures that I will post on social media, you will see Jay's the Jewellers, and you'll see the car, that Vauxhall 11, still in situ outside Jay's the Jewellers. Obviously, there's lots of witnesses. Obviously, you've got the staff inside Jay's the Jewellers. You've got all the people who congregated outside Jay's the Jewellers. You've got the people who tripped over Jenkins as he ran. You've got all of the staff inside Brook House. You've got the taxi driver, of which Jenkins and Rolt jumped on the running board, etc., etc., and the men that they barged past at Brook House. All of them gave witness statements. The problem is, they're all awful, like really bad. So I went through all the witness statements and I had to compile this list, and this is my list. And because all the men look very similar in a way, and there was nothing really identifiable about them, it's hard to really pin down who was who. Even the witnesses couldn't really tell what people were wearing. So this is what I've worked out. So The first man was 23 to 24 years old, 5'6", long dark hair, clean shaven, wearing dark clothing and no hat. Now I'm guessing that's Rolt. Second man, 23 to... See, all these dates are wildly out. Like, Rolt was 17. I'll add in these details as we go through. So the second one, who I've worked out, is Jenkins. 23 to 27 years old. Okay, he was 22. 5'10", slim build, fair hair, dressed in a fawn-coloured raincoat. Yeah, they got that detail right. No hat. He did have a hat. Dark, greasy hair, very high cheekbones, clean-shaven. So that is Jenkins. The third man, who is Geraghty, 35 years old. He wasn't, he was 20. 5'8", no, he was 5'10". Medium build, blue-green Macintosh, it was blue, grey cap, sallow complexion, medium blue overcoat with large, faint reddish checks. They got that right, but many people didn't. Blue cap, see, grey cap, blue cap, all the same. White silk handkerchief, which was tied at the back over his face, wearing a dark suit, blue shirt with a collar and a tie. I'm guessing that was Geraghty. But see, that's why it was impossible for the police to really nail down who these people were. Because if you've got 30 people and they can't come to they can't agree on what a person looks like, how are you gonna take the case forward any further forward? It's almost impossible. So the police were struggling. There was no real details about these men. None of the stolen items were found at that point because obviously they hadn't stolen anything. They'd went in there. They hadn't got the safe wasn't open. The cabinets weren't open. They basically came away with nothing. In fact, with Jenkins having dropped his gun there, they came away with even less. So this is how bad they were as criminals. The discovery of Jenkins' raincoat was really important. Now, I kind of glossed over it because I did it at the ending, but this is the detail. So, inside that fawn-coloured raincoat was the maker's stock ticket. Now, that is, back in those days, when a tailor would make a coat, they'd leave a little stock ticket in there. So, if there were any problems with the jacket, you could bring it back and you could say, I've got a problem with the jacket, and they go, oh yes, inside is my stock ticket, that's fine, that's my we made that. So that fawn-coloured raincoat was made by Burton's the tailors at number 5 to 9 High Street in Deptford. And this was shown to Arthur Ellis Amos, who was the manager of the store, and he confirmed that it had been sold there on the 30th of November 1946, so just maybe about 5 or 6 months before. And it was sold to a Mr. Thomas of number 60 Park Buildings, E16. Now, living at that address was a lady called Mrs. Vera Kemp. Vera Kemp was the sister of Charles Henry Jenkins. Obviously, she'd been married. That was her married name. And now she was interviewed, and she confirmed that the raincoat was her husband's. His name was obviously Thomas Kemp. Sorry, I said Mr. Thomas up there. I should really have said Mr. Thomas Kemp. I'll update my details. I don't know why I'm doing that. So the jacket belonged to a Mr. Thomas Kemp. They spoke to Vera Kemp, who was the sister of Charles Henry Jenkins, who we know as Jenkins. They interviewed her, and she confirmed that the raincoat was her husband's, Thomas Kemp. And she said that it had been stolen a few weeks prior in the Green Man Public House in Ridinghouse Street, which is not too far from Charlotte Street. It literally is around the corner. She seemed nervous in the interview, and they intercepted Thomas Kemp before he got home, where he stated that he had lost that jacket and the pictures. So their two stories entirely clashed. On interrogation, he admitted that he had loaned it to Harry. Harry is the nickname of Charles Henry Jenkins, who we're calling Jenkins, 1 week before. So that's where they knew. That's where they knew that Jenkins was the man who was wearing the coat during that robbery. Binga banga boong. Lovely, lovely. One also important thing that happened was obviously Rolt got rid of the gun. There were 4 guns in total there. Jenkins dropped his in the shop. We got that one. That was fine. Geraghty hid his guns. They were actually found in Red Hill on the south coast, a couple of days later, there was kind of someone had said we found a gun here, and it actually matched the ones that were lost. I haven't put those in the story because it throws out the story. But there was a 10-year-old boy called George Mizzen who lived in Stepney, and on the 17th of May, so just a couple of days. No, probably about 3 weeks after the robbery, that would be. He was playing with his friend Dennis in the mud of the Thames. Don't forget, this is 1947. There weren't a lot of things to do except play in mud. We've all done it, haven't we? The tide was out, and at the bottom of Shadwell, the dock stairs in Shadwell, off Gammis Road, his foot hit something hard. It turned out to be the revolver. It turned out to be the 38 caliber Bulldog revolver. No, sorry, that would be the 30... Yeah, that's the 38 caliber revolver. And he took it to Shadwell Police section house, just on King Park in Wapping, and it turned out that was the gun, which is perfect. That's exactly what they wanted. So they got the jacket and they got the gun, which started tying people together. I mentioned in there very briefly that Walsh was arrested. I didn't mention how. It is quite a nice story. So obviously this is why Extra Mile's there. Thank God for Extra Mile. So basically, there's a gentleman called John Austin Morris who was 54 years old. He was a detective officer in the Admiralty, which is attached to the Royal Marines. Now, he's a former retired Met police officer up until 1945, so 2 years prior, and he was formerly stationed at Plumstead in South London, which was where Walsh actually lived. And part of his duties, he would visit various police stations, including his old Plumstead branch where he used to live. And that day he decided to visit Shooters Hill police station, not too far away. And he was talking to Sergeant Clinker. Good name, that, Clinker. He was talking to Sergeant Clinker, who mentioned that William Henry Walsh, who was a known felon, was wanted. And he showed him a circulation in the Police Gazette, which basically said, "We are looking for this man. If you see him, bring him in." At 1:50 p.m. on the 16th of May 1947, John Austin Morris was driving along Plumstead Common Road towards Woolwich. This is all in South London. South London, innit? Where he sees Walsh, who he already knew, walking along. He already knew him. Decides to, because obviously Walsh knows that he's now a retired copper, so he can't. Well, he thinks he's a retired copper. He thinks he can't really do anything. He can. He decided to engage Walsh in a kind of a conversation for about 10 minutes, kind of just a regular, "How you doing? What's going on? Hey, oh, mate, geezer." And he deliberately bided his time until PC 251, who's a PC Farthing, who was literally just round the corner on his bicycle, until he came round the corner. John Austin Morris beckoned the policeman, grabbed him, pinned Walsh to the floor, and he was taken to Woolwich Police Station and arrested. Oh, fantastic. John Austin Morris was also awarded the Captain Ralph Binney Memorial Medal for his actions of that day. That's a bravery medal. I've heard of quite a few people who... That seems to be a medal that a lot of people get if they do something brave in, to help solve a crime, or, I think I might look into that some more. See if there's any other people in London who've received the Ralph Binney medal. Now, of the trial, it was a 6-day trial at the Central Criminal Court, which we all know as the Old Bailey. It was started at 10:30 a.m. on Monday the 21st of July 1947 and concluded on the 28th of July. Charles Henry Jenkins, Christopher James Geraghty, and Terence John Peter Rolt, I've been struggling to say that throughout the whole bloody record, were tried before Mr. Justice Hallett. All had previous convictions, who I mentioned at the start, and were convicted of murder. Obviously because they couldn't prove who had fired that fatal shot. Now, even though during one of the interrogations, Geraghty had said, "Yes, it was me, I fired the fatal shot," they couldn't prove it. How can you prove it? Really, it's like, he hadn't got his fingerprints on a gun. Obviously, he's got no powder burns there. Even detectives will tell you that the chance of actually getting a fingerprint off a gun, because guns are by and large oily, is about 5%. It's very rare. So when you get these TV shows and they go, "We've got a gun, we've got a fingerprint," that's bullshit. It really is. That's TV bullshit. It's like the chance of getting... a fingerprint off a gun is remote, which is really why the police don't deal with that too much, because it's just not, it's not something that's really going to solve a case. You're going to have to find a gun that just isn't oily, which by and large they are. Geraghty and Jenkins were sentenced to death for murder in the pursuit of a robbery, and obviously they were using a gun, which was one of the 5 criteria for which is a difference between serving a life sentence and a death sentence. But with Rolt being only 17 years old, because he was classified as a minor, he was detained at His Majesty's pleasure for a period of not less than 5 years. By what I can find, he seemed to have served 15 years. Although whether he got extra time while he was in prison, I'm not too sure. That's about as far as I could find out what he was in there for. As mentioned before, William Henry Walsh and Michael Joseph Gillam were both tried for the Bayswater robbery. They were found... excuse me. And they pleaded guilty to this. Walsh felt ill around the time, having been committed to trial at Marlborough Street Magistrates Court because he was suffering from thrombosis. Exciting. Now, Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt all appealed their convictions. Their appeals were heard on the 3rd of September 1947, just a few months later, and all 3 of those appeals were dismissed. The murder trial was convened for just 15 minutes, and the jury came back and unanimously found all of them guilty of murder. Fantastic. Now, obviously, there's loads of information in this case. I had to sit and read a file of... Basically, there's a whole other file that goes with this whole murder file of people who state that Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt weren't involved in the murder at all. And you go through all this whole case, and there's all these people who say, no, he was at the Wentworth Art Model Gallery at Jerusalem Passage in Clerkenwell. And all these people are basically saying, oh, God, no, he was with this person, and he was with this guy who was a soldier, and he was 70 miles away. He was in Southend-on-Sea at the time. And it's all bollocks. It really is. So any of the stories you read online about people saying that Geraghty, Jenkins and Rolt were not involved in this robbery and murder, it's complete bollocks. I've read this whole file back right through, and all of these extra testimony that came after the case, it didn't come during the case, it came after the case, it's all bollocks. None of it makes any sense at all. Good. I think that was it. I think that was the case. Whew, did that make sense? Was that interesting? God, that was exhausting. I'm tired just talking about that. I thought I'd mention something that might be quite interesting. I'm going to make a little change to Murder Mile. It's something I decided today. I posted it on my Murder Mile discussion forum. There's a lot of interest in it, so I've decided to do this. Don't worry, it's nothing horrible. Obviously, we're halfway through season 2 now. I'm enjoying it. Hope you're enjoying it too. You can nod if you like. Nod now. Nod now. Look like a weirdo. People will go, no, say yes. No, say yes. Say yes. Say yes, Michael. I'm enjoying it. Say it loud. Go on, say it now. Doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the car, whether you're on a bus, in the shops. Just say, yes, Michael, I agree. Yes, Michael, I agree. And then say, I will kill people. I will kill people. Because you want to look like a weirdo, don't you? This will be the change to Murder Mile. It's something that I hope you'll enjoy. I enjoyed season 1, doing all the little murders that we do of Soho. I've really enjoyed doing Extra Mile. They've been really important. I think having a break in the middle of the season with Extra Miles are really useful as well. They help me do the research. And I really loved doing Blackout Ripper, the 8-parter. Had a lot of fun with that. I think a lot of people really responded well to the Blackout Ripper series. So what I've decided to do is end each season from now on with multi-part series. So we've done Blackout Ripper. In the same vein as that, I think I'm going to go back to my specialist subject, someone who I really enjoy writing about. I've got loads of stories to tell about him, and I'm thinking about doing the full story of Dennis Nielsen. Dennis. So, don't know how many parts it will be. Obviously, I'll have to work that out as I go along. Another boat going past full of dickheads. But it'll be Dennis Nielsen. So obviously we've already got a 2-parter in the in the catalogue already about the people who Dennis didn't kill, or the ones who survived. But what this is going to be is kind of now he's dead, a cradle to grave. So I'm really going to look at his past, going to look at his family, going to look at his life. Really going to be and hopefully learn more about the victims. Now, the problem with this is, unlike the Blackout Ripper, the file isn't available at the National Archives. It's what year are we? 2018. So it's not available till 2083. So unless you guys are willing to wait for another 60 odd years, 57 years. So I doubt that. So what I'll do, I've got loads of information already. There's loads of other ways that I can find information about Dennis Nielsen's victim, and what I'll do is a big old multi-part profile about Dennis Nielsen. So that will end season 2, and then I've got some other ones for season 3 and season 4. People are really gunning it past today, really pissing me off now. Slow it down! People are just fucking dickheads. They're gonna lose their... Yep, they're gonna lose their deposit. I'm going to call, and they're going to lose their deposit. Ha ha ha! It'll be about £100. Thank you very much. So hope that's good. I've got some questions from some listeners. These came in a while ago, but I thought I'd go through these today. So this is from Lorraine. Lorraine did ask a little while ago. Mike, hello. That's me. Hello. Do you pop into a McDonald's or a Costa to upload your podcast? Because obviously I live on a boat and I don't really get a lot of internet out here. How do you go about uploading Murder Mile on the good ship Murder Mile? It must take a lot of data. Yes, it does. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Where I am at the moment, surrounded by floaty dickheads. This is pissing me off today. Yeah, it does. And where I am now, I barely get phone reception. I barely get internet. So what I do is when I do my tours on a Sunday morning, I start my tours at 11, but I get into the coffee shops at about 7 a.m. and I entirely abuse their internet. It's the only way I can do it at the moment, because I don't get broadband at all. Kim Nixon sent a question. She said, "I've got another question. It's not true crime related. When you have a narrow boat and you're frequently moving, as you mentioned, as you do, how do you get your post delivered?" Yeah, no, that's a good point. I have a PO box, which is good. It's in Soho. It's on my website, so people can send me stuff if you want. Don't send me dirty knickers or poo. You can if you want to. I'm sure people in Soho are used to receiving dirty knickers and poo. But yeah, no, I have a PO box, which is great. When I'm in town, it's there. The problem is, where I am now in the country, I'm about 30-40 miles away from my PO box. So when people like grumble in the mornings about having to get their post, and they're having to get out of bed and walk downstairs to go all the way to the door to pick up their post, yeah, I have to travel. I have to do like 60-mile round trip to get my post. It's really annoying, but it's all right in winter. I don't mind it that much. Whew. So that was Murder Mile. How long did that take? Cool, that was almost a 2-hour record. That was tiring. This is going to be a bugger to edit. I've no idea how I'm going to edit this one. Oh, it was fun while I was thinking up the idea, but now I'm thinking about it. Now it's just like, how am I going to make... I'm going to make it look like I'm rewinding and fast forwarding. Oh, I need to work that out. But first, I'm going to have a sit down. I think I might have a beer. Yeah. Anyway, that was fun. Hope you enjoyed that. We're going to be back next week with another murder case. I don't know what it is yet. I haven't even checked. I've got a whole list in front of me and I've kind of half researched them, but now I need to start focusing on Dennis Nielsen. Ooh, Dennis, that's exciting. So that's Murder Mile for this week. Hope you enjoyed that, etc. I don't know how to end this. You know me, I've forgotten how to end it. What shall I do? Should I just say bye? 1, 2, 3, bye. Oh, I don't know. It sounds shit, doesn't it? Maybe how do I end it? Maybe I'll sing a song. Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter all the while. In this world where we live, there should be more happiness. So much joy we can give to each brand new bright tomorrow. Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let our hearts be as one, as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love. To everyone who enjoyed Morecambe and Wise, that was Bring Me Sunshine by Morecambe and Wise. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Oh, thanks to all the new Patreon supporters. You guys are fab. And to everyone who's a regular listener, thank you so much. I'll catch you soon. You'll be good now. Bye.